Hello, it is Sunday, January 22nd, the day of the new moon, and I'm here with LGBTQ activist and filmmaker Dante Alencastre. I'm Dr. Douglas Sedownik. I'm an author activist. I started the LGBT specialization at clinical psychology at Antioch University, and we're here to talk about the important movie AIDS Diva, The Legend of Connie Norman, which is screening at Antioch on Tuesday, February 7th at 6 p.m. Please let us know if you want to come. And we're here to talk about Dante's role in creating the movie. Dante's an important filmmaker and member of the LGBT community. He's been involved for 16 years doing all kinds of important movies that really strike home to the heart of what we need, what we need to confront with, how we need to move forward. And this movie about Connie is really important to me because, well, I'm in the movie, but also as one of the talking heads. But before I became a psychotherapist, I knew Connie, very important person in the AIDS activist movement, saved many of our lives, actually, really important human being, very, very elevated human being, very, very funny as well. I was so touched and moved by Connie that I was so delighted to write actually a cover story, I think in the late 90s, on Connie, right before she died from AIDS. And I'm so excited to get right into it, dive right in about helping you understand the amazing personality of Connie and also why Dante decided to make this movie. So Dante, welcome to our podcast. And can you just let us know a little bit what drew you to make this movie about Connie?
Hi, Doug. That was a wonderful introduction to Connie Norman. Well, I'm not a native Angelino, so I didn't have the fortune of ever meeting Connie Norman. I feel that after watching hours and hours of archival footage and talking to all her dear friends like you, Peter Cashman, Tori Osborne, and Valerie Spencer, that I know more of her, what made her tick, what made her come from being a runaway street kid into the powerhouse that she became. You know, she was the only voice of the T when there was no T on the LGBTQ spectrum, and also about her own gender journey. Coming from in the 80s and 90s of being a very heteronormative transgender woman into becoming more open to the gender fluidity of Native Americans, the Mahus, the Hijras. So what drove me to Connie's story was the fact that I came out as a gay man in New York in 1980. So it was really like right before we started hearing about grit. It wasn't coined as AIDS yet.
Right.
And all, and my friends in 82, 83 started disappearing, just leaving town, leaving college, leaving the campus, leaving the dorms. And I was scared stiff. I was petrified. There were so many rumors. There were so many misconceptions of how you get it, what it was, that I was very apolitical. And one of the things I'm most shameful of is, especially looking at that footage of all my peers, my contemporaries, fighting on the street, putting their life on the lines, laying down, doing the civil disobedience like Connie did and her peers. I did not do any of that. Even though I was in the epicenter in the middle of Manhattan,
Yeah.
where everything was going on down the street. I could have just taken a subway and go to an ACTA meeting, going to some demonstration, going to some march, going to some funeral. I did not do that. So when I was given the opportunity by one of Connie's friends to look at her life, to look at her archives, to look at her thoughts, to look at her aspirations for her fledgling community, I just grabbed it because I felt such, this is my redemption, not only as a gay man, but also as a storyteller. But I'm going to be able to tell the story of somebody who meant so much to so many people. And like you said, she saved lives, and she had been largely forgotten. Even here in LA, her story had been and her presence and her legacy had been forgotten here. And that's something that I and my co-producer and writer researcher John Johnston said, no, we're not gonna let that happen. We're gonna bring her out, and we're gonna be intentionally making a film that speaks to today. Unfortunately, it was too on point because then we had a second pandemic.
Yes.
Scattered us
Thought that,
all,
right.
that killed us all, a lot of people, but it was a mainstream. It was not like, there were some similarities, but not all of them. You know, the people back then, it was the community taking care of its own. Is the gay men being taken care of by their lesbian sisters?
Yes.
So, and there was still the demonization of a whole group of people, but back then it was in a larger scale. We had no allies. We had allies in politics, in government, church, even our own families turned away from us. So that was the big thing, and Connie came out all of that. She came out of those ashes of being a runaway
teenager,
worker, abuse, alcohol, drug addiction, prison time,
she went
and to become the street activist that she became, and galvanizing a whole group of people.
I so appreciate you kind of being so honest with us and letting us know a little bit some of the motives behind some of them of your interest in connecting back with the important history that we've often sometimes my younger clients forget that our community has been through enormous struggle and hell, and those of us who are here to tell the story, as you so nicely put it, feel in your case, and I think as well as in mine, a kind of moral responsibility to go back in time to maybe work out one's karma, in your case perhaps, but also to revitalize the important memory of this person who, as you're saying, did so much both for the gay community, for the emerging trans community, for the gender non-binary movement, and also, basically risked her life many times dealing with the police, getting arrested, leading people with the bullhorn. I remember sleeping out. Some of these people were sick as dogs and sleeping out. I remember I did a big reporting of the County USC effort among AIDS activists to make sure that we got an AIDS ward, because we didn't have one at the largest hospital in LA County. Connie was very instrumental. I remember actually how she got her start, I believe, is that the news people were over there watching all these people who were sleeping on the steps of LA County USC, and Peter Cashman actually put Connie in front of the newscaster. I think this is actually in your movie, and she just started talking very articulately, and the star was so-called born then. So it's so great that you are inscribing your efforts within a larger historical context. I think that's one of the great aspects of the movie.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you bring Peter Cashman and other people who were so taken by Connie and galvanized by her fight and her resiliency and her compassion and her humor, that they actually took upon themselves to videotape her. Like
before
those huge tapes. That was the start to them, and they just wanted to document everything she did. And it was not only demonstrations or marches or arrests. She was being videotaped also in her private life.
Yes.
And I think that's what makes the film unique, that we were able to digitize all that footage from way back then, almost 30, 25 years ago, and create a whole documentation of a person, how a person becomes from, which she was just, housewives in Altadena, to become
a housewife with a very campy homosexual, but nonetheless a housewife in Altadena.
And she became the powerhouse that you were talking to, and all the other things that she did to make her, the people that she came in contact with, feel her love, feel her compassion, feel her empathy. She was very, very cognizant of the power that she had, and
Yes.
how people will follow her to the ends of the earth to change things as they were. Because, like she says in the film, she knew at that time, people knew that they have only this amount of time to live.
Yeah. Something about
How
the
you gonna how
time.
you gonna
Mhm.
you're gonna just take care of yourself physically and spiritually and just die away silently, or you're gonna be turning to the streets and organizing everybody, because she wasn't only organizing, you know, trans folks at the time. She was organizing everybody and meet her hate haters, you know, face to face, which a lot of people, avoided. She did not.
It's one of the wonderful things in the movie is you actually show her standing up to the haters in public. And
Wow.
what a wonderful trans affirmative, queer affirmative panache you illustrate her having and going to battle, but in this very trans way, in this very queer way. So it's through words, it's through argument, it's through Socratic wit and wisdom that you capture that. It's just so remarkable, both as a filmmaker, as an historian.
Yeah, I mean, we were really blessed by having all that footage. And I remember sitting here, like this is I was watching her footage during the early parts of the COVID pandemic. It was just funny to me to watch that footage and say, yes, that's what we need to hear right now. I remember particularly there was one weekend after the George Floyd murder, people were actually chanting, the world is watching right outside my door. And as I was watching the video of Connie when she was in Chicago, with the police and you were there with the police in
Very
those horses,
scary.
the protesters and
I dove under
dragging
a
them,
horse. So very
yeah.
scary.
And there was
Horses were galloping.
shame, and the world is watching, and all those other chants that have been so transcendental of movements now.
Mental, right, of the civil rights movement, of the
Yes, the
women's
women's
movement.
movement, gay liberation movement, the
Right.
AIDS, and we still hear them nowadays.
Kind of more a moral cry at the injustice when you're having people who are fighting for their lives and who did nothing wrong other than be queer folk or trans folk, to be so ostracized. And from Connie's that and you capture it so well in the movie, the utter in urgency and poignancy and humor, and you can see her in the movie. There's police there about to, perhaps do violence to the demonstrators, and she's, shouting shame, shame, or speaking out against some homophobes at some meeting that she's attending. Um, you capture how she synthesizes all of these aspects, and I think so important for our young people today, or anyone today, to sometimes we're on one hand we have so torn. We have more civil rights than Connie would ever have expected. At the same time, we have almost as much, if not sometimes worse, oppression. Look at what's happening with trans folk. People are still being killed. So, it's not as if we've solved our problems, hardly to the contrary. So the movie comes at an important time, I think, in our movement, where on one hand we have all this assimilation, on the other hand we have still all this oppression. So we have to.
And it's coming to us, fast and furiously now that we have the new Congress that we have. I mean, the amount of anti-trans initiatives in almost every state of the
Yes.
union, it's staggering. I'm totally disgusted by how, with all the problems we have in our country, this is what people they want to legislate on drag queens, on pronouns, on kids, playing the sport they want to with their peers. I mean, it's just it's really. I mean, and of course, as we know, this affects mostly the people who are more vulnerable, which is the people of color, the families of color, people who rely on social services and public services to get healthcare, in terms of transitioning medically and all of that, who go to public schools, who use public, swimming pools.
Yes.
Everybody, because if you have the means, you can just rise above it,
Yes.
But don't, being
Class, minority stress. Mm-hmm.
and just being poor makes you vulnerable to all this, ridiculous and inhumane laws. And this is happening here in our country. Imagine, because we have shown the film in abroad. We shown the film in Latin America, in Peru, in Mexico, Costa Rica, which the situation is even more dire than here. They don't even have any kind of protection whatsoever. I'm not saying about Mexico, but I'm talking about Peru, where I'm from.
Yes.
LGBTQ people have no protection whatsoever.
Right.
They're not even considered, vulnerable populations.
Yes.
So anything can happen to them. They can get
arrested.
Jobs. The lease can be rescinded. Even stupid things like going to a restaurant and people saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, but this is a reserved table because you're presenting as the opposite or a different presentation identity that they perceive." So the film has gotten around the world in places that I had no idea that she was going to have any impact in, because we all need to organize. We all under threat. No matter how progressive your country is. And let alone talking about some of the talking heads in the film who are people living with HIV for many, many years, the survivors. Yes. People seem to have forgotten about the stigma of being living with HIV and
yes.
AIDS, and that aging population, and what's going to happen to them when they need more care, as they age out, and then living with 25, 30 years of, taking medication.
And we actually haven't begun to deal with that hardly at all. I think the movie shines a light on all these different topics of classism and transphobia, civil rights, AIDS, and health. Very, very, very important, and not enough represented. So I think that's very important. There was actually just even today, I just woke up this morning, there was a problematic cover story in the New York Times today. I don't know if you saw it, about this dilemma that trans youth don't feel comfortable being able to discuss their transition journey with their families. So the schools are becoming safer havens. And now some of the parents are actually suing the schools. So there's a cover story today. I thought, well, how timely with us, discussing Connie and trans issues becoming much more visible, but also the trans community becoming therefore more oppressed, more targeted.
Yes, yeah. And then, so the statistics that come out of the Williams Institute, for instance, of how many trans youth try to commit suicide or complete suicide, it shouldn't surprise us, because we're living in this world where they're trying to erase them, make them invisible. Yes. I mean, not even gathering, not even getting the scientific information, It's like
yes.
Kids aren't born with the prejudices of their parents.
Oh, good point. Very important.
They don't hate kids if they're effeminate or they're butch or they play with dolls. That all comes from the parents.
Of course.
And we're creating these toxic situations, even in like elementary school, of kids already pointing who's different, who's not. When it's the part of the childhood that should be joyful,
That's such a wonderful point.
That should be where you feel safe, where you can be whoever you want to be, which is one of the points which I always get goosebumps when I hear Connie say at the end of the film, to be yourself. The most important part of your life's journey is that you need to be yourself, because you know who yourself is. You
Mm-hmm.
know, now that committee that's in your head, you know deep in your heart who yourself is, and you have to listen to that and become that. You know, that's the most important part.
You know, as someone who was an activist who never thought I would become a psychotherapist, it was not in my mental framework at all. I'm sure Connie played a role subliminally in that. I don't believe I had even considered it by the time I was getting to know her and interviewed her by the time she died. But the point that you're making, I'd like for you to talk about it a little bit more, actually, are moments in the movie where Connie's emerging in a whole new way as a type of affirmative psychotherapeutic teacher, as a wisdom teacher with wise things about how to be congruent. I
Yeah.
mean, that's one of the most wonderful aspects about the movie, because you're trying to, obviously a person's much bigger than a book and than a movie, but you're successful at illustrating. She just wasn't one thing. She kept growing and growing, and connected with the two-spirit tradition, connected with this idea that perhaps there's something in being trans that is, certainly in her case, is about being spiritual.
And I think one of the things that John and I we loved about Connie is that she was constantly listening and soaking up
Mhm.
information, even though she was, I think she barely graduated from high school, you know,
Mhm.
and she was asked to speak in colleges and speak about third gendered and about her journey, and that she would always find a way to speak beyond her time because she
Mhm.
knew her time was
I
up.
love that. Mhm.
She was always one of her biggest regrets, as you remember from the film. She says to Sheila Kuehl that I'm not going to be there to speak to the kids like an old codger, because that's what she really wanted. And that's her biggest regrets about, you know, having to die so early. And I think with the film, we're trying to do that, Doug. I mean, with your
Mhm.
help and everybody else who collaborated on the making and creating of this film,
Mhm.
we're trying to have Connie speak to them, you
Mhm.
know.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I hope you can come and join us, you know, as part of the event at Antioch University. We're hoping to bring the film to other universities, other campuses, because I think her message is, like you said, of hope, compassion, love, fight, and all of the other things that we need right now. Is
Yes.
timeless. It's urgent, and I hope that you can join us in this, you know, in this to continue her legacy, because that's all she was about. She was very concerned about who the future generations, what was going to happen to them, you know. So this is her legacy of love and hope that I'm trying to spread with our film at Antioch and other places, LA, beyond LA, California, the States, Latin America, Europe, wherever the film goes. That's the message that people gravitate to. Yeah, because we need that more than anything.
That's so beautiful, Dante. Maybe I can add a little memory, and then maybe we'll close up with another reminder of folks to come. If there's anything else that occurs you want to mention, please let me know. But I was there actually in the hospice. It was the Chris Brownlee Hospice, I believe, that Connie was involved in creating. You know, the queer community, trans community, created many of the health and human services for our own people to both live and die in, because the government was not that beneficial at the time. And it was maybe a few days before she would pass. She was in the hospital. She looked absolutely fine. It was just funny, witty. There was no fear whatsoever. It was just as if we were conversing like she was home. But I do remember very clear an energy that she wasn't going anywhere. It was something about that. It was hard to put our fingers on. You know, we're still learning about all of this, but she wasn't going anywhere. And that there was a big effort, perhaps among the constellations, to incarnate this soul person who was speaking a new voice, but that was also very ancient, and that she wasn't going anywhere, and we mustn't forget her. So it's such an honor to talk to you, Dante, because you listened to that and you made sure, because now the film's there, it's in our archives. We'll always be able to look at it. It's really there for our community. What a great resource. So I think you did a great duty to her and to us to make sure we can now actually see Connie as if she's with us today, just as she was. And that's why I think it's so important that we're talking, but also folks come and see the movie. Antioch University, 400 Corporate Pointe, Tuesday, February 7th, reception at 6, and then the movie starts at 7. And I don't know if there's an RSVP list that I can refer people to right now, but you can just actually email me if you want to.
Show up.
Just show up. Just show up. And you know how to contact me, those of you out there, if you want to let us know. So
one thing I'm gonna say, I mean, the film has a website, which is very easy. It's
thank you.
acedivaconnie.com. You can communicate to us through email or just leaving a note. We have also social media at my name at Dante Alencastre. We also have at Diva Connie. That's also Instagram. And yeah, I mean, just come to our screening. Hopefully we can put the link with the podcast somehow, which is, it's being created by the university. But otherwise, just show up at 6 and just say, hi, I heard about the film. I want to know about Connie. And she just join us, Connie was all about community. She loved her community dearly. So she would love for you to get to know her a little better.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you, Dante. It was wonderful getting to talk to you, talk about the movie and Connie. Very, very, very pleased about that. And we'll sign off. Hope to see you all at the screening.
Yes. See you on February 7th.
February 7th.
Bye.